Hello, and welcome back to Topics of Impact. My name is Matt Pettinelli. I'm your host, as well as the founder and CEO of CapGrow Partners. Today, it is with great pleasure that we welcome Nicole Jorwic from Carrying Across to the program. Nicole, good to be with you.
Hi, thanks so much. Glad to be here.
All right, Nicole, like we do with every guest on the show, we're going to take a minute to get to know you a little bit. Are you ready?
I'm ready, as I can be.
All right, here we go. First, what is your job title?
I am the Chief of Advocacy and Campaigns at Carrying Across Generations.
Okay. Which city and state do you live in?
I live in Washington, D.C., so not a state. And I'm also frequently in Elmhurst, Illinois, where most of my family lives.
All right. I love it. Just down the road from us. What is the favorite part of your job?
The favorite part of my job is spending time with care workers and those who receive care as we're advocating, whether it's at the state or federal level. Definitely my favorite part.
Wonderful. What's one of your favorite cities to visit?
Well, outside of Chicago, I would definitely say Paris. I was lucky to study abroad when I was younger, so it's got a nostalgic feeling for me.
For sure. That's great. What is your favorite dish to make?
Pretty much any kind of pasta, and I'm pretty well known for always cooking it perfectly.
That's right. Well, that's a way to my heart. All right, time's up. All right, Nicole, let's dive in.
Sure.
You've had a very impressive background. As you mentioned, you're in the district, coming from the Chicagoland area. Can you kind of walk us through the multiple positions that you've held in the past and currently?
Sure. So my work experience, aside from being a babysitter, is really in direct care. I worked as a camp counselor, as a classroom aide, and also as a direct support professional. And so before I went to law school, that was really my background, which obviously helps me in the work that I do today. That perspective. I also am an attorney. So I went to Loyola in Chicago, and I practiced special education law, representing families when they were in disputes with their school districts around services. And through that, I kind of started to see how we could make more of an impact versus one-on-one cases to move towards policy change. And so I was really lucky to get an opportunity in Illinois to become the executive director of the Institute on Public Policy for People with Disabilities, which is a group of service providers that support best practices for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Then I went and worked for the state of Illinois under then Governor Quinn, running the Employment First initiative, supporting employment opportunities for people with disabilities and all people in the state. And then we got a new governor, and I shifted to working into DC, kind of one of those last one in, first one out situations. But it ended up working out great for me because that's when I moved to the ARC of the United States. I started as the director of rights policy and was there for almost 7 years, and ended as the senior executive officer of state advocacy and senior director of federal policy. And from there, I have been at my current position for almost a year as the Chief of Advocacy and Campaigns at Carrying Across Generations, leading our federal and state work, and getting to do work across disability, but also aging, and supporting family caregivers. So that's a little bit brief bio.
Yeah, I mean, quite impressive, and go Ramblers from Loyola. That's great.
Yes.
Obviously, going from state government in Illinois to the district, can you kind of walk us through, from the ARC, what got you into your current role and Carrying Across?
Sure. I love and miss the chapters of the ARC. I really loved my time there, and definitely deeply miss the chapter network and the individuals that chapter support. But in the work that I was doing with the ARC, especially, I was really focused on expanding access to home and community-based care, and also dealing with the workforce issues for the workers that provide that care. And what that looked like in the last almost 2.5 years at this point has really been focused on, obviously, COVID response. And there was a huge need there, with some victories, some non, but it's where I really started working more closely with Carrying Across Generations at a table we call the Care Can't Wait coalition. And I represented the ARC at that table. And that's when we really started talking. I remember it was a little more than 2 years ago. And it's where we started talking about things like the care infrastructure, the fact that some folks might need a bridge or a tunnel to get to work, but also we need care workers for people with disabilities who want to work, for family caregivers who are currently filling in the gap in the system. And so working with the Care Can't Wait national table is really when I started becoming more getting to know Caring Across Generations a little bit better. And Caring Across is really focused on the coalition building component. We're also obviously focused on policy change, which has been my passion in my career, but then also working on really changing the narrative and changing the cultural understanding of these services. Care itself actually can be a complicated word, but we need to make sure that we're getting the general public to understand that care, whether it's care for people with disabilities or care for older adults, is something that everybody is going to need at some point. And so often people don't know that they need it until they need it and they don't have access to it. And so that kind of idea that care is something we all have in common, and Caring Across Generations' real focus on bringing disability justice into their work is a big reason why I moved over to Caring Across, and really excited about the work we're doing here.
For sure. Such important and impactful work. And it's wonderful to know that someone's looking after it. It's needed, to your point, more than people really truly understand.
Yeah.
All right. On to the second topic, Medicaid. Let's dive into the importance of it. It's a governmental program, the why behind it, and most importantly, how it can be fixed, in your opinion.
Sure. Yeah, you can't put me in front of a camera really and not get me to talk about Medicaid. I think I could probably do this in my sleep, but that's because it's so important. It's something that I really care about talking about, because it's something that so few people understand, including legislators at the state and federal level. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Medicare and Medicaid be conflated. And so first, let me just make that distinction. Medicare is a system that provides services, including healthcare services for older adults, folks over 65. Medicaid is a program that does also provide those healthcare services for folks under 65 who meet very strict financial eligibility requirements. Medicaid, though, is really the only federal or state program that provides what we call long-term services and supports, or LTSS. It's the main funder and only funder really for home and community-based services, which fits under that umbrella of long-term services and supports. And Medicare, on the other hand, does not. And that's something that a lot of folks in the general public, including people I'm related to, really don't get. They think that the nursing home services that their family member may want, although we know that less and less folks are going that direction, or the home care services that I know my grandma used after she broke her back this year, that those services are going to be covered by Medicare, but they are not. Outside of a short-term rehabilitation stay, that's all that Medicare covers. So that 90-day rehabilitation stay. So Medicaid is, in addition to that traditional healthcare program, that funder of those home and community-based services. And that was intentional, but it's a relatively new program. The home and community-based services side of the program was started only 41 years ago by President Reagan in 1981. And because it was a law that was first passed in 1965, it needs to be updated. So you asked how it can be fixed. One of the things that needs to be fixed is that the historical lack of investment on the home and community-based service side. The institutional side, and that's facility-based care like nursing facilities, or a lot of folks might not realize in Illinois, there are still 7 state-run institutions open. Those services are considered mandatory under the federal Medicaid law, while home and community-based care, which is obviously not optional for the people who need it, is considered optional. What that looks like is waiting lists, because states can't put a waiting list on mandatory services. But all of those 15,000 plus people in Illinois who are currently on the waiting list for home and community-based care do have technically an entitlement to institutional care, but they would rather wait on a waiting list, sometimes for up to a decade, than have those services, which is why what we need to do to fix the program isn't about taking anything away from one side. It's just about putting home and community-based care on equal footing. So that's what we need to do. We need to make home and community-based care a mandatory service while also building the infrastructure, the workforce, the service system we couldn't pull 15,000 people in Illinois into the current system that's strapped. So we have to do both in order to really fix it.
And I'll add to that the housing, which is obviously something that CapGrow focuses on exclusively. And, one other comment I'll add to it is it's hard to rationalize a governmental system that on the home and community-based care side that getting one of those waiver slots is referred to as the golden ticket. That's problematic when there are 15,000 plus people that are waiting and need, most importantly, those golden tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really just something that so many folks don't understand. And I really am glad you raised the housing part because that's something that's also different. Because obviously, when you're covering institutional or facility-based care, you're paying for where someone's physically living. Mm-hmm. But on the home and community-based care side, Medicaid does not pay for room and board and can't support that housing. So we have to support both the housing, whether it's through traditional housing programs, expanding some of those programs, yep. But also looking at seeing why Medicaid can't cover housing, and also so we need to have the housing and the services at the same time.
It sounds like we need to do a second episode just on this topic alone.
For sure.
All right, going on to our third topic. Important topics that should be advocated for at a federal level. Now that we just kind of scratched the surface a bit on Medicaid, what important topics do you think should be advocated? Is it access to LTSS, economic autonomy, adjusting the way you are eligible for Medicaid dollars and, restrictions on how much you can have in your bank account, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, it's all of that. But it's really looking at both within the Medicaid program and also outside of the Medicaid program, how we can support people with disabilities to have the supports that they need and to have the lives that they want. Mm-hmm. And that does include, for some folks, that will include Medicaid, of course, but we also need to expand Medicaid buy-in programs that allow people with disabilities to work and still maybe pay a little bit towards the service that they need in order to work. We also have to expand to create programs outside of Medicaid for folks that might not be eligible because of some of the strict eligibility requirements for functional requirements and that sort of thing. A lot of folks don't realize that the Affordable Care Act actually did have an LTSS component that was later repealed called the Class Act that would have created a cash level benefit for some people with disabilities and older adults to pay for direct care workers and that sort of thing. There's plenty of folks, and we're carrying across as part of those conversations, who are thinking about creating something like that, a state level benefit. There's state level benefits ideas too that have already passed in Washington state, and we're looking at that. We also want to make sure the workforce. I need to say that over and over and over, because the biggest thing that we need to make sure that we do is no matter where somebody is working, making sure that they're making family sustaining wages. We have a direct care workforce that over 50% have to rely on other publicly funded benefits in order to survive. And that's not okay. The national average wage is less than $12 an hour, when in so many states and localities at this point, folks can do much less emotionally and physically taxing labor and make more money. Is just like the waiting list is horrendous. That's just as horrendous. And so at the federal level, a lot of folks don't realize how complicated it is to actually raise those wages, because it's also tied to the Medicaid rate for workers who are working in Medicaid funded service settings. And so we need to make sure that federal investments are going in to the Medicaid program specifically to raise those wages, in addition to expanding access. We can't expand access without a workforce and without a well-paid and well-trained workforce.
Yeah, I think it's very well said. I was speaking with a provider recently who said that if they give out 10 job offers to be a DSP, they hope that 50% of those people whom have accepted the job offer actually show up for the first day of work. And the work that the DSPs are providing I don't know if you really can put an appropriate price tag on a wage side for it. It is incredibly difficult at times, at the same time, incredibly rewarding. But it is a line of work that takes someone to really be emotionally invested as well as physically, and it's not easy.
It's not easy, and it's very highly skilled work. A lot of folks don't realize how much direct care workers are job coaches. They are also doing that personal care. It's such a nuanced position that deserves the wages to go with it.
For sure. All right. That's another topic that we can add on to our series. All right. Wonderful. All right, Nicole, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think we have clearly identified a couple more topics that we can carry on, but really appreciate you being here. Best of luck with all that you're doing with carrying across and moving into the state of Illinois. And if there's anything we can be doing here at CapGrow Partners, please do not hesitate to reach out.
All right. Thank you so much, Matt. It was a pleasure.
Absolutely. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Take care.